All right, ladies, picture this. It's sometime in early 1949, Shady Grove, Pennsylvania, a tiny village in Franklin County. Cold, quiet, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody's business. And in a cramped, rented two-car garage, a 28-year-old man named John Landis Grove is staring at a problem. He's standing there with his brother Dwight and their partner Wayne Nicari, surrounded by partially built farm wagons. Rubber-tired wagons they've been manufacturing since the business started back in February of '46. The business is doing okay. Not great, but okay. They're building wagons by hand, selling them to local farmers, making ends meet. But there's this problem, and it's a simple one really, almost embarrassingly simple. They need to move steel plates, heavy ones, the kind that weigh a couple thousand pounds, and they need to move them around this tiny garage workspace to weld them onto the wagon frames. Right now, they're doing it by hand, with levers, with rollers, with whatever they can improvise. And it's slow, it's dangerous, and frankly, it's ridiculous. John Grove's been looking for a small commercial yard crane, something simple, something affordable, something that could just lift the steel and move it where they needed it. He can't find one, not in their price range, not anywhere nearby. So he's thinking, what if we just build one ourselves? Now, this isn't coming out of nowhere. John Grove's not some random farm boy with a wrench. He's got engineering training from Drexel University. He spent the war years working for Westinghouse building steam turbines for battleships. Then he served in the Army Medical Corps. He knows machinery. He understands hydraulics. He's got the technical background to try something like this. But still, building a crane from scratch in a garage? That's ambitious. His brother Dwight's supportive. Wayne Nicari, his partner, the financial guy, he's skeptical, but he's not saying no. So, in 1949, John Grove starts building. Not a crane for sale, just a crane for them, a tool they need to do their job better. He starts with a 3-wheeled frame, 2 wheels up front for propulsion, 1 wheel in the back for steering. Simple, maneuverable, fits in the garage. He builds a basic boom, nothing fancy, just a steel arm that can pivot up and down. And here's where his hydraulic knowledge comes in. Instead of using cables and winches like most cranes at the time, he uses hydraulics. A simple twin-cylinder hydraulic hoist raises and lowers the boom. Smooth, controllable, powerful enough to lift 2 tons. The whole thing's crude, let's be honest. Rough welds, basic fabrication, no paint job. It's a tool, not a product. But when John Grove fires it up, extends that boom, lifts a steel plate off the ground, it works. And that's when things get interesting, because word gets around. Fast. Neighbors stop by the garage, other small manufacturers in Shady Grove, guys running shops in nearby Greencastle and Waynesboro. They see this little 3-wheeled crane moving steel around Grove's workshop, and they start asking questions. Where'd you get that? Who makes it? Can you build me one? John Grove's answer at first is simple. It's not for sale, we built it for ourselves. But the requests keep coming, and Grove's starting to realize something. There's a market here, a real market. Small businesses, fabrication shops, lumber yards, construction companies, all of them need something like this. Something mobile, something affordable, something that doesn't require a crew and a day of setup. The big crane manufacturers, they're focused on industrial work, shipyards, steel mills, refineries. Their cranes are massive, expensive, designed to lift hundreds of tons. Nobody's making cranes for the little guy, the shop owner, the small contractor, the guy who just needs to move a couple tons of material around his yard. So by the end of 1949, John Grove makes a decision. He's going to refine the design, clean it up, and build a few more, see if he can sell them. Wayne Nicari's not entirely convinced. The wagon business is paying the bills. Why risk it? But Dwight backs John, and together they push forward. Through 1950 and 1951, Grove builds cranes slowly, one at a time, each one a little better than the last, learning, improving, fixing problems. And they sell. Not fast, but steadily. By 1952, Groves built enough cranes that he introduces what he's calling his first industrial yard crane. Still small, still simple, but refined, reliable, and selling. The crane business is starting to overtake the wagon business, revenue-wise, attention-wise. And by 1955, everything's changed. Dwight decides to focus on the wagon side, takes that division, splits off. John stays with the cranes, and Wayne Nicari, the financial partner, he stays with John. And suddenly, Grove Manufacturing isn't a farm wagon company that makes cranes, it's a crane company. By 1955, they're building 15 to 20 cranes a year, supplying hydraulic cranes to dozens of neighboring businesses. The reputation's spreading. And John Grove, standing in that same cramped garage where he built the first one 6 years earlier, he's realizing something. That simple decision, building a crane because they couldn't find one to buy, that wasn't just solving a problem. That was the beginning of something much, much bigger.
So, Grove Manufacturing's got a crane business now, and it's growing. But here's the thing about the mid-1950s. The construction world's changing fast. The post-war building boom's in full swing, housing developments, shopping centers, the interstate highway systems being planned. President Eisenhower signs the Federal Highway Act in 1956, 41,000 miles of limited access highways, the largest public works project in American history. And all of it needs equipment, needs cranes. But not the massive industrial cranes that have dominated the market for decades. This new kind of work, it needs mobility, speed, flexibility. John Grove's been watching this shift, and he's been thinking. His early cranes, they're good for yard work, material handling, small fabrication shops, but they're limited. 2-ton capacity, basic boom, 3-wheel frame that's maneuverable but not exactly stable under heavy loads. If Grove's going to compete in this new construction market, he needs something bigger, something more capable, something that can work on actual construction sites, not just factory yards. So through the middle 50s, Grove's team, which is still small, maybe a dozen guys total, starts developing new models. They move to 4-wheel frames, more stable, better weight distribution. They increase capacity, 4 tons, 6 tons, 10 tons. They improve the hydraulic systems, more pressure, better control, faster cycle times. And here's where Grove makes a decision that's going to define the company for decades. He's going to focus on rough terrain cranes. See, most construction cranes at this time are truck-mounted. They drive on roads, but once you get to a job site, especially if that site's unpaved, muddy, rough, they struggle. Grove's thinking, what if we build cranes specifically designed for rough terrain? Big tires, 4-wheel drive, high ground clearance, cranes that can navigate construction sites, gravel yards, unpaved roads. In 1959, Grove unveils his first true rough terrain crane and his first truck crane. These aren't yard cranes anymore. These are construction machines. And the market responds immediately. Contractors love them because Grove's cranes can do something the competition can't. They can drive onto a site, set up fast, do the work, and move to the next job. No transporters, no permits, just drive it there. By 1960, Grove introduces the RT-58, and this machine, this is the one that makes Grove a household name in the construction industry. 14-ton capacity, 24 to 60-foot telescopic boom, 3 sections, hydraulically extended. Cab down design, operator sits low, good visibility. Powered by a Detroit diesel 453N, 127 horsepower. That's serious power for a crane this size in 1960. Power shift transmission, 6 speeds forward and reverse, high-low range selection that automatically shifts between 4-wheel drive and 2-wheel drive. The RT-58's designed to be simple, reliable, easy to operate, easy to maintain. And it sells. Really sells.
Grove's building them as fast as he can. The garage in Shady Grove's been expanded multiple times. They've added buildings, hired more fabricators, more welders. The crew's growing. But demand's outpacing production. Grove's got a backlog. Contractors are waiting months for cranes. And the big manufacturers are noticing. Companies like Lorraine, Linkbelt, Northwest Engineering, they've dominated the crane market for decades. And suddenly this small company in Pennsylvania is eating their lunch in the mobile crane segment. So they respond. They introduce their own rough terrain models, truck cranes, trying to match what Grove's doing. But Grove's got an advantage. He's not a massive corporation with layers of management and slow decision-making. He's an engineer who understands construction. He listens to his customers. When a contractor says, "I need this feature," Grove doesn't form a committee. He builds it. Through the early 1960s, Grove keeps innovating. Longer booms, higher capacities, better outrigger systems. And in 1965, Grove ships his 1,000th crane. 1,000 cranes in less than 15 years of serious production. The company's got over 300 employees now, multiple buildings in Shady Grove, dealers across the country. Revenues in the millions. John Grove, the guy who built that first crane in a garage to move steel plates, he's running one of the fastest-growing crane manufacturers in the world. But success brings complications. Because by the mid-60s, John and his brother Dwight, they're not seeing eye to eye. Dwight's still running the wagon division. John's focused entirely on cranes. There's tension, different visions for the company. And then there's the financial pressure. Growth requires capital, new equipment, larger facilities, more inventory. In 1967, an offer comes in. Walter Kitty Company wants to buy Grove Manufacturing. The offer's substantial, life-changing money for John and Dwight and Wayne Mickery. John Grove doesn't want to sell. He's built this company from nothing. It's his vision, his designs, his relationships with customers. But Dwight's ready to cash out. Wayne Mickery's ready. And the financial reality is they need capital to keep growing. So in 1967, Grove Manufacturing is sold for $30 million. John Grove stays on, tries to keep running the crane division the way he always has. But corporate ownership changes things. There are new managers, new policies, new priorities. And by 1968, John Grove has had enough. The internal strife with his brother, the frustration with corporate bureaucracy, maybe health issues. Whatever the reasons, in 1968, John Grove leaves the company that bears his name. He's 47 years old, wealthy, accomplished. He's revolutionized an industry. Most people would retire, travel, relax. But John Grove buys a motorhome, spends a year traveling the country with his wife, Cora, visiting friends he's made in the construction industry over the years. And he's thinking, because John Grove, he's not the retiring type. He's thinking about another problem he's noticed, another need in the construction industry that nobody's really solving well. Working at height, aerial work platforms. The equipment available in the late 60s, it's dangerous, inefficient, scary, frankly. And John Grove's thinking, what if I could build something better?
All right, so 1969. John Grove's been traveling, thinking, and he can't stay away from the industry because he's noticed something. On construction sites, at industrial facilities, everywhere he's traveled. People working at height, on ladders, on scaffolding, in bucket trucks that are clumsy and limited. And it's dangerous, really dangerous. Falls, injuries, deaths. The aerial work platforms that exist, they're mostly scissor lifts, limited reach, fixed vertical motion. Or they're boom trucks with buckets, but the operator's stuck at the end of a boom with no real control. Grove's thinking, what if you could build a self-propelled platform with a telescoping hydraulic arm and put the controls in the basket itself, so the operator has complete control, can position themselves exactly where they need to be. It's the same philosophy he brought to cranes: mobility, simplicity, operator control. So in 1969, John Grove partners with Paul Shockey, a talented engineer he'd worked with on hydraulic fire truck ladders back in the late 50s. Together, they launch a new company, Condor Industries. The first machine ships in July of 1970. It's exactly what Grove envisioned. Self-propelled, telescoping hydraulic arm, controls in the basket. An operator can drive it to position, extend the arm, and work safely at height with full control. The market response is immediate. Construction companies, aircraft maintenance facilities, industrial plants. Everyone who needs to work at height safely wants one. By 1973, the company's grown so fast they rebrand. They call it JLG Industries, John L. Grove's initials. And through the 70s, JLG becomes to aerial work platforms what Grove Manufacturing became to mobile cranes, the industry leader, the innovator, the standard. Meanwhile, back at Grove Manufacturing, the company's continuing to grow under Kitty ownership. Through the 70s, Grove introduces bigger cranes, more sophisticated models, higher capacities. They shipped their 20,000th crane in 1979. 20,000 cranes in 37 years. But the industry's getting more competitive, more complex, and Grove's dealing with the challenges of being part of a large conglomerate. In 1985, Grove acquires Coles Cranes of England, one of Europe's largest crane manufacturers. This gives Grove a foothold in European markets, access to different designs and engineering approaches. For a while, they operate as Grove Coles, eventually consolidating under the Grove brand. Through the 80s and 90s, Grove keeps pushing boundaries. They introduce the TMS series, truck-mounted cranes. Versatile, mobile, can travel at highway speeds between jobs. They develop all-terrain cranes, combining the off-road capability of rough terrain cranes with the highway speed of truck cranes. Best of both worlds. They introduce the Megaform boom design, trapezoidal cross-section, optimal strength to weight ratio. They develop twin-lock boom pinning, Megatrack suspension. Grove becomes known not just for cranes, but for innovation, for pushing what's possible with mobile hydraulic lifting equipment. In 1990, the corporate identity changes to Grove Worldwide, reflecting their global presence. And in 1997, Grove celebrates its 50th anniversary. Half a century since John Grove and his brother and Wayne Nickery sat on a living room floor in Shady Grove and officially founded the company on January 1st, 1947. By this time, they've shipped 50,000 cranes, 50,000 machines, spreading Grove's philosophy of mobility and hydraulic power across the world. But John Grove himself, he stepped back from JLG in 1993, retired, finally, at 72 years old. He spends his remaining years in philanthropy, donating to Shippensburg University, $2 million to the business college which gets named after him, supporting local hospitals, establishing foundations. He's described as the Babe Ruth of his industry, a pioneer, an innovator. And in 2003, on June 16, 2003, John Landis Grove passes away at his home in Greencastle, Pennsylvania. He's 82 years old. He's lived long enough to see both his companies, Grove Manufacturing and JLG, become global industry leaders, to see his innovations become industry standards, to see his name synonymous with mobile hydraulic equipment. But Grove Manufacturing, the company, it's about to go through one more major transition. Because in 2002, 1 year before John Grove's death, Manitowoc Company acquires Grove Worldwide for $271 million. Manitowoc is a major construction equipment manufacturer based in Wisconsin. They've got their own crane brands, Manitowoc lattice boom crawlers, Potan tower cranes. By acquiring Grove, they're adding the premier brand in mobile hydraulic cranes to their portfolio. And here's what's remarkable. The Grove name doesn't disappear. Manitowoc keeps it. Because Grove isn't just a company, it's a legacy, a reputation built over decades. Today, in 2025, Grove cranes are still built in Shady Grove, Pennsylvania, the same town where John Grove built that first three-wheeled crane in 1949. The facility's enormous now, over 1 million square feet under roof, 300 acres, 20-plus major buildings. They build rough-terrain cranes, all-terrain cranes, truck cranes, industrial cranes, capacities from 14 tons to 550 tons. And the principles that John Grove pioneered, they're in every machine. hydraulic telescoping booms, fast setup, operator control, mobility. Designed for real-world construction work, not just theoretical specifications.
So let's talk about what made Grove different. Because it's not just that John Grove built good cranes. Lots of companies built good cranes. It's how he thought about the problem. See, when Grove started in 1949, the crane industry was dominated by companies with decades of history. Linkbelt, Lorraine, Northwest Engineering. These were massive operations with huge factories, established dealer networks, engineering departments. And their approach to crane design was traditional. You build the biggest, strongest crane you can, you optimize for maximum lifting capacity, maximum reach. If that makes the crane expensive, slow to deploy, difficult to transport, well, that's just the cost of lifting heavy things. John Grove didn't accept that trade-off. He was thinking from a contractor's perspective, because he was a contractor, or at least he started as one, building wagons. A contractor doesn't need theoretical maximum capacity. He needs to do specific jobs, and he needs to do them profitably, which means the crane needs to be mobile, needs to set up fast, needs to be operated by one person, not a crew, needs to move between jobs without requiring a convoy of support vehicles. That philosophy drove every design decision Grove made. Take the telescoping boom. That's probably Grove's most significant innovation. Before Grove, most mobile cranes used lattice booms, sections of steel framework that had to be assembled on site, like building a giant erector set every time you wanted to use the crane. This took time, took multiple people, took space, and it meant you couldn't quickly move from one lift to another. Grove's telescoping boom solved all of that. Sections nested inside each other. You want more reach, you extend it hydraulically. You're done, you retract it. No assembly, no crew, one operator, one control. It seems obvious now, but in the early 50s it was revolutionary. Or take rough terrain capability. Grove didn't just put his cranes on truck chassis and call them mobile. He designed them from the ground up for construction sites. Big tires, high ground clearance, four-wheel drive, suspension designed for rough ground, not paved roads. Most manufacturers were thinking about how to make cranes that could drive on highways. Grove was thinking about how to make cranes that could work in the mud. And that meant contractors could use Grove cranes on sites where traditional cranes couldn't go. New construction, remote locations, anywhere roads weren't finished yet. Or look at the operator's cab placement. Early Grove rough terrain cranes used a cab down design. Operator sits low, near the center of rotation. Why? Because it gives better visibility, better feel for the machine. The operator's closer to the work, can see what's happening, can make fine adjustments. Competitors often put operators way up high, better view in theory, but disconnected from the actual lifting operation. Grove prioritized operator feel over theoretical advantage because Grove understood that cranes are operated by human beings, and human beings need to feel connected to what the machine is doing. Every innovation Grove introduced, it came back to that same principle. Make it work for the person using it, not for the engineer designing it, not for the marketing department, for the contractor on the job site who needs to get work done profitably. And that approach, it created fierce customer loyalty. There's a crane rental company in Detroit, J.J. Curran Crane Company. They bought a Grove RT-58 in 1962, brand new. That crane is still in their fleet, still working, still generating revenue, 63 years later. The current owner, Jeff Curran, he calls it a simple tool that's easy to operate. They always find work for it. It fits into tight spaces, great for pick and carry operations. 63 years of service? That's not just good engineering. That's designing with the end user in mind. And Grove's approach, it influenced the entire industry. By the 1970s, every major crane manufacturer was making rough terrain cranes, telescoping booms, hydraulic controls. They had to, because contractors demanded it. Once they'd used Grove cranes and experienced the difference, they wouldn't go back.
Linkbelt, Lorraine, all the major manufacturers had to adapt or lose market share. Grove forced the industry to rethink what a mobile crane should be. And here's what's fascinating. John Grove did it twice. First with Grove Manufacturing and cranes, then with JLG and aerial work platforms. Same philosophy, same approach. Take existing equipment that's clumsy and dangerous and operator unfriendly and redesign it from the ground up with the user in mind. JLG's cherry pickers, they put controls in the basket. The operator has complete control over positioning, can make fine adjustments, doesn't need someone on the ground operating controls. Again, it seems obvious, but before JLG, most aerial platforms were controlled from the ground. The person in the basket was just along for the ride. Grove Industries, JLG Industries, they're both at their core about the same thing. Giving operators control, making equipment that works with human beings, not against them. And that philosophy, it's why both companies became industry leaders, why both brands are still synonymous with quality and innovation decades later.
All right, so here's the thing about John Grove's story. It's not just about cranes. It's about how innovation actually happens. Because we tend to think of innovation as these big, dramatic breakthroughs. Some genius has a vision, disrupts an industry overnight, changes everything. That's not how it worked for Grove. John Grove didn't set out to revolutionize the crane industry. He set out to solve a specific problem. He needed to move steel plates in his garage workshop. He couldn't find equipment that worked, so he built something that did. That's it. That's the origin story. No grand vision, no master plan, just a guy with engineering knowledge and a practical problem. But here's what made Grove different. When other people saw his solution and wanted one, he didn't say, "Sorry, it's just for us." He listened. He refined the design. He built more. And when those cranes sold, he didn't just keep building the same thing. He kept improving, kept listening to customers, kept solving new problems. Longer booms, higher capacity, better mobility. Each innovation came from actual needs, real-world construction problems that contractors were facing. That's user-driven innovation, and it's incredibly powerful. By the time the big manufacturers realized what was happening, Grove had years of experience building what contractors actually wanted, not what engineers thought contractors should want, what they actually wanted. And there's a lesson there about listening, about staying close to the work, about not letting success insulate you from the people using your products. John Grove, even after the company grew to hundreds of employees, he stayed connected to contractors, traveled to job sites, talked to operators, understood their problems. That connection, that understanding, it drove everything Grove Manufacturing did. And when John left the company in '68 and started JLG, he did the exact same thing. Went to construction sites, watched people working at height, saw the problems, built solutions. Now, Grove's legacy today, it's complicated. The company that bears his name is owned by Manitowoc. It's part of a large corporate structure. The scrappy garage startup is long gone. But the principles survive. The focus on mobility, on operator control, on practical, user-driven design. Those are industry standards now, but they started in a garage in Shady Grove, Pennsylvania, with a guy who needed to move steel plates and couldn't find equipment that worked. And JLG, the aerial platform company, it's now part of Oshkosh Corporation, another major industrial conglomerate. But JLG's principles, putting controls in the basket, giving operators autonomy, designing for safety and ease of use, those survive too. They define the industry. So here's what strikes me about John Grove's story. He wasn't trying to build companies that would last forever. He was trying to solve problems, specific, practical problems. But by focusing on solving problems well, by staying close to users, by iterating based on real feedback, he ended up creating something that outlasted him. Ideas that became industry standards, approaches that competitors had to adopt or fail. That's the quiet revolution. Not dramatic, not flashy, just relentlessly focused on making things work better for the people using them.
And there's something almost poetic about the fact that Grove cranes are still built in Shady Grove, the town named after the family, the place where it all started. You can visit the original garage. It's a museum now. Grove Crane number 3 is housed there, the actual machine that's the predecessor of modern rough-terrain cranes. It's a small building, unassuming, the kind of place you'd drive past without noticing. But that's where it happened. That's where a 28-year-old engineer with a practical problem changed how the world builds things. John Landis Grove passed away in 2003. He lived long enough to see both his companies become global leaders, to see his innovations become so standard that people forgot they were innovations. He was inducted into the Construction Equipment Hall of Fame in 1993, one of the first 10 people honored. He donated millions to universities, hospitals, charities. The business college at Shippensburg University bears his name. But his real legacy isn't buildings or endowments. It's every construction site in the world, every mobile crane, every aerial work platform. It's the idea that equipment should serve the operator, not the other way around. It's the understanding that innovation comes from listening, from solving real problems, from staying close to the work. And it's the proof that you don't need to start in a massive factory with unlimited resources to change an industry. You need a garage, a problem, some engineering knowledge, and the willingness to build something better. That's the story of Grove, the quiet decision that changed everything. A man who needed to move steel plates, who built a crane, who listened when people wanted more, and who, in doing so, revolutionized how we build, how we lift, how we work at height. Not through grand visions or dramatic breakthroughs, through practical solutions, through listening, through iteration, through understanding that the best innovations don't come from engineering departments, they come from the job site, from the operators, from the people doing the work. That's John Landis Grove's legacy, and 76 years after he built that first crude 3-wheeled crane in a Pennsylvania garage, it's still changing how the world builds.